Hello, everyone. I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Webinars. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Bank Relationship Management, Trends, Metric, Communication, Collaboration. I would like to thank our webinar partner today, Financial Sciences, a leading provider of integrated enterprise financial systems for multinational corporations and financial institutions, whose visual Treasury and Risk Management solution, Atom, is helping companies unlock the strategic value of Treasury, and also whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today. Building and managing mutually beneficial relationships with banks has always been and will always be a top priority for Treasury professionals. Disruptive technology and increasingly complex business and regulatory dynamics make this task more challenging than ever. How do you assess the value of your current bank relationships? Do you really understand the ROI you offer your bank partners? Do your bank partners really understand the ROI they offer your business? Do they care? Today you'll discover how to measure bank relationship management success, how to manage all dimensions of your bank relationship management, some current and emerging trends in bank relationship management, and the ROI of bank relationship management done right. Before we delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury webinars and our agenda, and then we'll get started. So at Treasury webinars, we offer virtual events to impact the career success of Treasury, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and finance professionals at companies of all sizes across all industries. If you have any questions regarding CTP credits or would like a copy of today's presentation, please send an email to ernie@treasurywebinars.com. Again, that's ernie@treasurywebinars.com. Also, those of you interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions, stay on the line for the duration of the webinar, and offer a short survey that will launch immediately at the conclusion of the webinar. Speaking of our survey that will launch immediately following the webinar, we appreciate everyone's consideration in answering our survey, as we always improve to strive the ROI we offer our attendees of our events. And so that's becoming more challenging now as everyone's getting into the virtual events business, but I know that we still offer a truly unique webinar experience. A little bit about our agenda. We're going to take a little bit of a high-level view of the coronavirus and Treasury, talk about some of the things that we've learned, some of the things that have changed, and some of the things that have changed and should change in terms of bank relationship management. I think we have some things that we should keep our arms around, right, that we've learned from the coronavirus. We're going to dive into some current emerging trends in bank relationship management. And then we'll talk about the role of technology in effective bank relationship management. And in doing so, I'll turn the floor over to my esteemed co-speakers, and then we'll take a really short look at a demo and see really how this technology in action. And I think it's really interesting on many levels, but in taking a more visual approach to managing Treasury and bank relationship management is incredibly eye-opening. And to me, it just really puts things in through a clear lens. And then we'll wrap things up with some takeaways. Now, I know everyone is excited to have a polling question, so I'm going to go ahead and launch our first polling question here. So I'm asking you to share with me so I can level set a little bit as far as the importance to your company. Do you believe, is bank relationship management a top priority at your company? Maybe not even close. You disagree? Kind of neither agree or disagree. You agree, or yes, it is a top priority. Personally, myself, what I've been speaking about the last couple of years is I haven't seen it being as much of our priority as I would have liked. I think we saw more attention being paid, obviously, back in the financial crisis, 2007, right, 2009. But then I think it's really gotten away. So when we have surveys about top priorities, well, bank relationship management isn't on there. And I talked to Treasury leaders, and they're like, well, that's just because it's assumed to be important. Well, I said, well, I don't think really that's the case, because when I talk to people, I just don't think that there's enough attention paid to that. So hopefully we'll get back to that. And really importantly, how do we measure relationship success, and how do we communicate those expectations and make sure that we're aligned? So now that we have all this data and information and technology, let's do a better job of understanding the value of both sides of the relationship. And for us practitioners, we need to be better customers. And I could have used that advice back in my day. All my bankers would tell you. So I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question real quick. Let's go ahead and take a quick peek at the results, and let's see A couple of you disagree or not even close, 7%. Now, some of your importance to that is really if you are a net borrower or not. So maybe you're a cash-rich company and it's not important to you. Agree, which is good, 22%. In my world, it would be good to have it as a top priority because I think that's extremely important. And I guess I might have to caveat it with this is some of that may depend on, as we start to see more and more technology and best of breed solutions, we might not be relying as much on our banks for our technology piece. And so I think that's something that I might need to consider as well. We need to do a little some survey work on that, right? And just see like the depth of the relationships and really that really from a bank, have you transitioned from a bank to that cloud-based solution? And I think that's proven valuable as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to answer that polling question. And so let's dive in a little bit. And I think, again, sometimes I think we don't put our relationship hat on enough. I think we've had to do that in the coronavirus space. So let's talk about the dimensions of bank relationship management. And so we have credit, obviously, extremely important there. How important that is, right? Where you stand depends on where you sit in terms of your credit needs. Capabilities and technology. Are you leveraging certain technologies for payables and receivables? What are those capabilities? 3 is, what is your relationship? Are you a transaction to them? Are you a relationship to them? Do you have honest and open communication? What kind of communication have you had since the coronavirus has taken hold? And I think we've seen some of those dynamics change. I've always told people from back in February, you need to communicate more and be authentic and be honest and really want that from the other side. I think some people got a little bit blindsided back in 2007 when banks were thinking about pulling lines and things like that and didn't communicate that with their customers. So on that front, I think banks have done a little better job. Also customer service, which I think is incredibly important as well. And I think our expectations have gone up in terms of financial professionals as we've gone to these SaaS models. People have to earn our business, right? Every month, maybe every week. So I think our bankers would do well to be in that mindset as well. And so these 800 numbers and things like that for Treasury related issues, it's not going to cut it anymore. Price is important, but I say price is what you pay, value is what you get. And so for me, as I'm managing that relationship, I want to say, what is it that my bank is offering me? I might not always go for the lowest price. One might be because someone offers me credit, but the other side of that might be that I want more customer service, right? That really matters to me. And then of course, communication, which now is being done much more in a virtual environment. And so hopefully you've adapted with your banks and you've both gotten comfortable with maybe having a Zoom call. Right? And so I think, so that's another thing we need to consider. And also on the communication side, which doesn't get enough attention, is what about the digital communication, right? So how are you getting your reporting? How many bank accounts do you have overseas? What kind of visibility do you have? So it's not only, you would think, person to person, right, communication, but what about how do our systems communicate with each other? And so all of these things are going to impact, right, that dimension. And also is you should be considering when you're trying to assess, what's the value of each and every relationship that we have here. So let's go ahead and access to capital. And this is a survey by our friends at Phoenix Tech and their Treasury Management Monitor. They have some great survey data there. So I encourage you to go to their website. And if you see them speaking at a conference, they do a great job there. And so just, it's getting a little bit stale, but it's more about, you need to be thinking in this way, right? Satisfaction with your credit renewal terms and processes. And so just from 2019, just kind of what we've seen, the middle market and large corporate, I think we have to be a large corporate. I think I'm pretty happy, right? If I see above and exceeds expectations, I'm actually surprised. And so that to me is fantastic. To me, I would think, okay, how did my last renewal go? And when is it coming up? And then if you had to go through that renewal during the COVID virus, that would be something I'd be interested in having you speak on a webinar for. So I think that would be incredibly interesting. But again, does your bank partner deliver access to capital in theory, right? Or in practice when you have to borrow, right? What does that look like? Is it easy? So what about when you bump up against covenants? Do you have any flexibility? And so those are all things you want to consider. Again, what bank services does your bank offer? Cost is a consideration, right? Ease of use is incredibly important to me, customer service, but also look at the innovation going on. Ask questions about the technology. Is it developed in-house? Is it outsourced? How do you maintain that? Is it a cloud-based solution? And for me, the solution providers that work with you as they need to, right? So maybe your business is evolving and you might need more functionality. Some of the most nimble companies, including our sponsors today, are actually working with customers to build out the technology to serve their customers. And so that's really the ideal situation. So just some things which you're probably all familiar with. We have integrated payables. We actually have AI going on in accounts payable. We have AI going on in accounts receivable. There's a lot of not noise, I should say. We're actually starting to see some real-time payments. I think we're finally getting a little more comfortable on mobile banking. I think we've had to in the coronavirus, and of course, you know, in that digital footprint. So what kind of services do we offer to help you manage your FX risk and your trading and maybe your international LCs and so forth? So let me go ahead and sneak in another polling question regarding the nature of your bank relationship. Would you characterize your bank relationships as accepting, better, good, or ideal? Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Anyone interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions today. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 10 seconds or so in order to be mindful of our time. I want to make sure I give my co-speakers enough time at the end of the webinar. Everybody knows I like to talk a lot, so I'm going to be a little bit more mindful this time. So let me go ahead and give you guys about 5 more seconds. Make sure you can get that answer in if you're interested in CTP credit. Of course, I want everyone to answer all the polling questions. We really appreciate that. You know, all you have to do is push the button. So let's go ahead and leave that up for a few more seconds, and we'll go ahead and take a quick peek at the results. And then take a quick peek. I think I'm pleasantly surprised here that we've got 76% of you at good or ideal. And then those of you, which is good, you all have a reason for being on the webinar. So some of you in the poor, not good and acceptable, and even in the good, right? And maybe in the ideal, you'll learn a way to make them even better. But I think one of the things is to just think about things a little bit differently. And sometimes your relationship will improve as you take more accountability. So reach out, ask, what can I do to be a better customer, right? And then you just be thinking in the mindset of, okay, it's poor. Why is it poor? Is it me? Is it my bank? Can I do anything about it? It's not good. Okay, why it's acceptable, right? But they are getting better. That's great. Let them know how they're getting better, and then ask the question, what can I do better? And then we all want to go from good to ideal. But I think the communication is important. Have more communication is better than less. So if you've got something going on in your business, in your publicly traded companies, why are you going to not give your bank a heads up if they're in your credit group, right? They got to see your Q3 results. Well, let's go ahead and talk them through that, right? Maybe the things are not on your industry is changing. What are you doing? You might not be receiving as much revenue. Maybe there's pressure on your margins. Isn't it better to let your banks know up front so they can be prepared? And then that shows that you value them also as a partner in a relationship. And of course, got to be careful not with the inside information, right? Not too much information, but you know, make sure you give them the color around that. So let's talk about, again, the relationship. It's important. A lot of these things seem like common sense, but I like to make things simple or keep things simple. And these are things that I'd like to have in front of me if I'm going to have that call with my bank partners, especially if I'm looking to add bank partners or shuffle them out. But I think on some level, we all should take the time to assess where you're at right now and why are you there? What value do you offer? And then what value do they offer you, right? If they're not offering the value that you want, are they capable of doing it? Do they want to do it, right? What's the cost of doing that? Do you need to look outwards, right? What's the cost of moving business away from that bank, right? What's the benefit? So these are things that come to my mind about relationships. Will your bank be there during the next crisis? To me, there seems to be a crisis like almost every day. So you have to look at the last few months and see what has your bank done for you? Have they been communicating with you? Have they been receptive to your communication? What do they really know about your company? Are they invested in your company, knowing your line of business, knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it? Now you have to be willing to share with them what you can. Obviously, we don't want to give insider information, but you need to see that commitment. What do they really know about your treasury objectives? Do they ask you, right, every quarter, what's going on right now? Where do you need help? How are we doing? How can we offer you more value? And not just come in and try and sell you everything under the sun. Hey, we got this new AI thing and payables. You need here. Why don't you do this? And it's like that just might not be anything, right? That might not be anything that you need. And so, do they understand what you need and why they need it? And do they help you understand what you need before you need it and why? What do they know about your treasury team? I think that's important nowadays. It's easy for them to do research on LinkedIn. And also, do they treat your team the same as they treat you? So if you're the treasurer or even the treasury manager or the CFO, does everyone get treated the same way? When I was a treasury manager, someone that worked for me had some phone calls, and I overheard a few of them, and they were not treating the person that worked with me, I don't say for me, and let's just say that didn't go over real well. So what do you really know about your bank, right? Counterparty risk is important. What are they doing? What are they doing in terms of technology? Maybe that's not your key focus. What are they doing in terms of credit? What are other areas they're expanding into? How is their financial risk profile? And then kind of related to all these above, but do you really empower your bank to understand, anticipate, and meet your expectations? And so if you have some sort of scorecard, do they know what that is? Do they know how you're measuring? Right. Do they meet your expectations? And one of the things that we've seen in COVID, which I've told people to do with all their business partners, you need to realign on your expectations. If you haven't done that yet, I think it's a great time to do that, even though we've been going through COVID for quite a while. We have a little thing called the election going on right now, right? So we might see a little turmoil. And so let's say, okay, let's call, all right, your expectations are this, right? You're used to XYZ. We might not be able to do XYZ now. I might need your help more often, right? Maybe you have different reporting needs, maybe you have different technology needs. And so whether you need something more or you're going to be able to deliver less, honesty and authentic communication is great. And here's another thing. Will you support your bank when they make mistakes? And this is something I didn't do well enough as a practitioner. And so everyone makes mistakes. Every bank makes mistakes. I wrote a blog about this earlier this week. So especially now with everyone's got more on their plate, we don't want anyone to make mistakes. So how do they handle it? Do they take ownership of it? Do they tell you what they're going to do about it? I don't want to hear an excuse. Do you want to hear an excuse? What is it? What are we going to do about it? And then if you work through a mistake, you're going to build a relationship. Way back when I used to work with the bank, and people weren't doing a lot of business in Mexico. And so we had some NAFTA issues, but I worked through that relationship with the bank. It no longer exists. So I can tell you it was Wachovia, and I made some amazing relationships through that, and I still have friends as we've gone through a few crises together. They're the ones that got me involved in AFP and speaking and all those other things. And so they really supported, I supported them and they supported me back. And so that's what a relationship is all about here. So let's go ahead and take a peek at the scorecard. This is something that I spent a lot of time on. It was probably a long time. I'm getting old, 15 years ago, right? AFP used to have these elaborate scorecards and templates, and everyone was all about scorecard, scorecard, scorecard. And I've seen that really go by the wayside. And I think we were making it too complicated, as with a lot of things. Just like when you have big data, right? You have to have a little bit of a data diet, right? And so I think our scorecard can be succinct, and it doesn't need to be so invasive. It's kind of like an RFP. Do we really need an RFP for everything? Maybe an RFI. So I think it can be an effective relationship tool. And then you need to make sure that you should share, right, your evaluation of them only with them, right? You want to improve the quality of relationship. You don't want to play banks off of each other, right? So that's not the way that we should do business as Treasury professionals. And then when you're doing a scorecard, you should have more than one person involved in that, right? So more than one person has engaging with the banks, maybe probably even your CFO, right? Your CFO, your treasury manager, your folks on your treasury team, maybe you have AP and AR services with them. Everyone should be involved in that. And then you might flip it around and do that little, whatever they call it, 360 and say, hey, I want you to let me know how I'm doing for you as a customer. And so how do you evaluate me? Can I get a look at that RAROC model? So how am I offering value to your company? And so just what we used to see, just as a little benchmark, the dimensions of what you might want to measure them on, the customer service level, your relationship manager, which I always wanted that to be the person that knew every single thing about my relationship. And way back when I was in Treasury, we got into this investment banker model. I think we've gotten away from that a little bit. What about their technical reliability? How about that account analysis statement? Can you understand that, right? We still haven't made any progress in that in the last 20 years. We made some, there's some account analysis tools out there, but the banks are still trying to use these encryption keys to make sure that you can't see what they're charging you. Sorry, banks, but that's just the way it is. So they should do a better job. They should be able to explain to you every single line on your analysis statement and what you're paying for it and help you benchmark it. You might want to do that counterparty risk assessment, and then you might want to do some specific service category analysis kind of based on that, depending on your level of spend there. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit you with a little polling question here. Just want to get a sense, and I've seen the different levels of adoption here, so I'm just curious of those of you on the line about you're using a scorecard. You're using it right now. No, but you used to use them. No, we have never used them, or you don't know. Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all our polling questions here today. Those of my friends who are interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all the polling questions, and also remember, you'll have to stay on till the end of the webinar and answer our brief post-webinar survey, which will launch immediately after the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys another 5 seconds or so. Then we'll go ahead and take a quick peek, and then we'll dive back into the dimensions of BRM done right, and we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive in customer service. Let's go ahead and share the results here real quick. We have, yeah, it's pretty low. I mean, I think it's even a little bit lower than I expected. So we had 16% yes, and then another 20% at least used to use them. So about 36% at some point. So that's still a little bit lower than I would have seen. You don't know. You know what I'm going to ask there. Might be a good idea to find out, especially if you're in Treasury in any way, even if you're not the treasurer, treasury manager, maybe you're a treasury analyst, maybe you're in finance or CFO. It's just something that would be interesting to know. And then as a office of the CFO, we should have a way to assess the quality of our relationship. So whether it's whatever kind of technology that you're using, and that should be standardized as well. And so if you've never used them, it might be something that you might want to think about. To me, I would have been, we never really did it because it was too complicated, right? We were cash rich, but I think it's something that we can right size, right? Depending on the complexity of your business and what you're looking for. So I think given the advances in technology, it's something we should endeavor to take another look at, and let's just make it easier and let's make it transparent. So thank you so much, everyone, for answering that polling question. So here's questions around customer service. Again, this seems like common sense. Are we do we want the 800 number? Do we have a dedicated customer service representative and a backup? For me, I wanted one person that I could talk to all the time, right? And someone made a good point. Even if you have that shared services center, you should look at them, right? Maybe you're outsourcing that to them in some way. So let's hold them accountable as well. So that's a great suggestion. So maybe it's not banks, or maybe you have an in-house bank. So we should also make sure that we have visibility into that, right? And so we need to still be holding them accountable. So thank you, Cindy. And so do you have visibility into your relationship? From one point, this used to aggravate me to no end. I'd be on the phone with my bank. They couldn't tell me all the different things we were doing with them. We had FX. We actually had benefit plan record keeping, and so that's something you want to make sure. And then I mentioned this before, is each member of your team treated with the same level of respect as your CFO and even your CEO? Again, do they know your treasury team? Do you have expertise, right, to your banks, you know, in terms of expertise? So does a person on the phone know how to answer your question? They don't have to be a CTP. It would be amazing if your relationship person was a CTP. So if you mentioned something about a wire transfer, does the person seem like they don't even know the difference between a wire and an ACH? And yes, I had that experience as a treasury manager, and I was not pleased about it. So what hours of the day, days of the week, and which languages, right, can they support what your business is doing, right, overseas and things of that nature? Do we have bilingual? Do you need that? Can they facilitate that? And of course, probably the bane of a lot of relationships, and we'll talk about how technology can help us here later. Alf will talk through some of the theory of that, and then Nathan will go ahead and show us live some of the technology that companies are using to get visibility into that, and it actually do a little bit of a comparative analysis on your bank fees, which is incredibly powerful. Again, these are things that you might think about, especially if you're the treasurer or CFO. Let's make sure that we're doing these things and benchmarking these things. Now, it's not like you should just say, my measure of success is my bank pricing is XYZ, or it went up or down. That might be part of it, right? But it's okay. What is the cost for what we're doing now, right? How does that compare with what others are doing? Does that make sense with our volumes, with the level of our relationship? So there's a little dimensions there. And you have to ask, are there any areas of the world which you have lack of visibility, right, into your services and charges? Understand what you're being charged for. Do you have negotiated pricing from each bank? So how is that? Had you on pricing? Do you want bank accounts do you have? Do you need each one? You might want to rationalize those. And then related, do you have a standard suite of services for your account? Do you really need all those things? How many services do you use? How often do you review them? I used to look at the bank statements every month, and I know there's software out there to let you do that. I encourage you to do that manually, or if you're a bigger company, take a look at that variance each month, right? If nothing else, and get yourself an automatic notice if it goes above 10% variance or 5% or 20%, and then why? So you're like, hey, we just did an acquisition. Okay, that makes sense that my bank fees went up. Now, if I see my bank fees go up and I don't remember that, I might call my bank and have a nasty conversation with them, but I don't really need to, right? And then, of course, where we still have some issues, how much are you earning on your balances now, which is probably not much. And then for your pricing, again, is it transparent? What's your pricing structure? Have you made your bank person virtually or in person walk you through line by line everything that you're charged for? Are they willing to do that? They should be. You should do the same thing, right, with your service providers. If you're outsourcing, right, I need to understand what I'm being charged for. And then in terms of your banks, it's great if they use AFP service codes. Not that that's completely transparent, but that's a good start. I used to manage a service code, so I know it's still pretty complicated. Does your relationship manager understand your account analysis statement? And then does your bank help you benchmark their pricing? I mean, there shouldn't be any secrets in the age of technology. If someone admits to me, well, we're not really the lowest cost provider here, this is why we're a little bit higher. We have more services. We do our things in-house. You have a dedicated representative. Your representative is a CTP. Guess what? I'm going to say thank you, and I'm not going to say a word about that pricing difference. And then just a little help on how do you assess what I call your bank IQ. Same thing, a little bit repetitive, but let's just look at it, and ask yourself these questions. Do you have visibility and uses and charges? Negotiated banks? Do you have too many bank accounts, right? How often do you use them? What are you earning for them? So all these different dimensions are things that you want to consider. Again, a lot of information from me to consume, so please let me know if you'd like a copy of the slides, and you also get a copy of the presentation. As one good friend of mine told me, I like to under-promise and over-deliver. And so you want to improve your bank IQ. You should define a process that identifies billing errors, right? Ensure your banks are consistent in recording fees and services. Communicate regularly with your banks. Let's do a pricing error. Understand variances in your bank fees and compare services across each bank, and make sure it's going to be apples to apples, right? Make sure that you're being fair. to your banks and the services and the tiers. I'm not on here to say all banks are evil because they're not, but they need to do a better job of being transparent. If you tell me what I'm paying for it and why, we're all good. You should conduct a service utilization review. If you don't do that at least once a year, examine all the services, right? Your analysis statements. You should have a summary of all your cash management activities. Maybe they should provide that to you. And create a mirror of your services within your Treasury processes and your organizations, and make sure you have your Treasury policies in place and they're being followed. So communication, right? We want to now it's a little bit more difficult. So we want to have in person, right? I suggest in person quarterly meetings, right? Maybe you catch up with them at events. If we get to go back to events like AFP, electronic is really important. Now I should put more bullets under here, right? We should have virtual meetings. We should have Zoom meetings, whatever you want to use for that platform, Microsoft Teams, right? Electronically, we're wanting to help us manage our relationships, our information reporting, and our bank fee statements. And my co-speakers will take us through some of that. And this is where I didn't do a good job, and this is where we can all do better. And so my bankers on the phone, I think you'll enjoy this section. I usually get good comments about it, but be a good customer, right? What does that mean? So we have an obligation to be a good customer. It's a two-way street. It's a relationship. Meet in person whenever possible. Understand each bank's RAROC model, and hopefully they'll be willing to share that with you. My services that I'm giving you, what is that driving the value I offer you? How do you look? Is our company rated the right way in terms of risk? And so I want to understand what I'm doing for you and what the value is. And sometimes that'll help me say, okay, I'm willing to pay a little bit more for this because I know your credit's important to me. Ensure your bank really understands your company. Answer their questions. Ask them, what else do you want to know? Be proactive in your communication from your side. Honest communication. And set and reset expectations as necessary. If you have a lot of acquisitions going on, let them know. Things are going to change. Let them know. So treat them as a partner, right? Don't look at them as always trying to sell you something. Maybe it makes sense for you to hear more about what they have to say, but let them know what you need and why they need it. And eventually, they'll be able to anticipate, right, what you might need and not just throw stuff out. And they will lead with things that they are good at. It used to aggravate me when my banks would lead with things that weren't really in their sweet spot. So lead with things that are in your sweet spot and be honest if something is not. So let's take a look at some trends. I did a survey with APQC in the fall of last year. I wanted to see if we really understood in Treasury what success looks like and what it might look like and what we like to call our next normal. And what I found was not surprising at a high level. I found that there was no consensus on how we measure success in Treasury, and we need to do a better job of measuring success, because if you look at how you deliver success in Treasury, first you have to understand what that is, right? And so we had 246 observations. Again, I'll glide through these pretty quickly because I want to give my co-speakers more time, but we had a good range of industries, really good at the top level, $1 billion and more. So we had some really good sized companies, had a good mix of treasurers, treasury leaders, and CFOs and multiple CFOs. And so just some things on bank relationship management to give some color to what we talked about. 86% have a systematic review. That's great. How often do you hold meetings? I love 51%, and I love 13% monthly and quarterly. Only when requested. I think that's a little bit, you need to do a little bit better. But then now I think as needed, right, might be a good thing to have on there. Do you use a bank relationship? So as I mentioned, our results are a little bit lower. Yes, so I think that's something that we are going to be taking another look at. Here's some surprising results to me, and I hope all of my survey respondents who took that survey, if you did, thank you very much. They understand their bank fees. So we had agree or strongly agree, which is 62%. So I thought that was really great. Benchmarking their bank fees, 81% said they do it. I'd like to know a little bit more how they do it, because that's not what I've seen and heard. But again, we had a lot of larger size companies. And then you understand your bank's RAROC model. And so it's good we have 60%, but I think it's good we're seeing content at AFP and the regionals about that, but I think that will help. So that transparency with fees and value is going to make it better on both sides of the relationship. We talked a lot about service providing, and so what's really key there is the transparency. Talked about the IQ. I talked about improving your IQ. And so let me go ahead and shift gears a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and pass the floor over here to Alf Newland, who is the CEO of Financial Sciences. So Alf, the floor is yours, my friend. Take it away.
Hey, thank you, Ernie. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Alf Newland. I'm a Managing Director of Financial Sciences. And we want to swing to the technology perspective of all the points that Ernie was covering in bank relationship management. Next slide, please, Ernie. So when we look at the technology perspective, actually, we start first from the business perspective, and we start top down. So we look at the role of technology really with regard to bank relationships should be able to help manage all aspects of a company's relationship with its banks. And that has multiple components. Some are obvious and some are not so obvious. It should also quickly show the relationship status. So a lot of this is based on significant amount of data. Some of our customers have many bank relationships, thousands of accounts, and it's a challenge to see everything quickly. So that's very important. It has to be done at an enterprise level and at a detail level, both. We also think technology should be able to answer the key business questions that Treasury professionals have about their company's banking activities. And that's not just at the operational level, that's also at the executive management level. So that's a key role for technology in our view. Automation has traditionally been important. It's probably even more important in this day and age. And it's not just certain types of transactions. It's really includes a number of different transaction types like bank fees, compliance, transactions, and very important is workflow. So the ability for the technology to integrate seamlessly with your banking partners is a must. And of course, this is not just reporting of data. Technology should also help support decision management. So that's what if, analytics, scenarios, modeling strategies and choices, things like that. Technology can play a very important and useful role. So this gives if you look at it organizationally, all the different components of a corporate bank relationship. Of course, as Ernie said, liquidity and funding. Banks provide significant funding activities to corporate customers. They provide lots of activities and services, and that's one of the big challenges that companies have is they want to see for different banking needs, what of their providers provide what services. And sometimes that's not so easy, particularly if it's regional, driven by regional needs. Service quality is key. None of our customers can conduct their business without banks, and their service level with the banks is extremely important to them. Compliance, KYC, reviews, things like that, that's also a must for all banking relationships. Cost, most big companies spend a lot of money with banks, and the banking fee structures that banks provide are very opaque. And you could argue why that is, but that is a fact. And it's not easy to see actually what the cost of certain transactional flows are, and particularly if you want to benchmark across banks. So that's a very important thing technology can help with. And one thing is workflow. We'll cover that actually in the next slide. That's also, we think, an important component. So to drill down in liquidity and funding, these are things like what's our current cash position and how are we using our cash? How much do we have by country? What's our cash by legal entity? What's our cash exposure by bank? How much credit do we have, basically? And banks are not the only one, but they're a key provider of credit to most companies. And it's very important to manage that credit exposure and the cost of that credit. How much do you have in actual borrowings? How much do you actually invest with banks? Because it's not just liabilities with banks. So often most companies have significant investments with banks as well. Activity and services, banks provide lots of services out there to the corporate marketplace. And for most companies, it's a challenge to manage the different bank relationships. So it's important to see at not just a high level, but at a fairly detailed level, what banks a company works with, what bank accounts do they have and why, are we actually appropriately closing and opening accounts as needed, what services do we have with each bank account. And lastly, the quality of bank technology is a key service driver, especially now. And a lot of banks are coming out with integration capabilities, so-called APIs. In our experience, and this we actually depend from a technology perspective, is extremely important to our ability to automate bank relationship activity. A lot of banks market APIs. I'm still on the last slide, Ernie. But from our perspective, the marketing is vastly ahead of actual bank capabilities. So one thing we would say in the technology space, some banks are very, very good at providing APIs for key banking transactions, cash reporting, bank fee analysis, opening and closing accounts, and other banks actually aren't. So we see a big disparity there, and we wish that actually the banking sector was more advanced on the API front. Next slide. So workflow, for most treasuries are a key service center for the organization. And in the sense that treasuries absolutely want to be a center of excellence, you have to actively manage workflow. And if you're doing workflow requests via Excel or just by email and things like that, we think it's very difficult to actually achieve center of excellence with regard to both internal requests that Treasury gets and, of course, external requests that Treasury has with its banking providers. So we think that absolutely technology has to automate workflow. And lastly, compliance, of course, that's also important in this day and age. And that's anything from signatory management, FBAR, bank reviews, audit, things like that. Next slide. So we wanted to wrap up by showing a quick demonstration of a few sample ways you can visualize and automate Treasury activity related to bank relationships. So I'm going to turn it over to Nathan Barnett. Nate.
Okay, great. Alf, could you just confirm you can see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's good.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Alf. So in the following demonstration, we're going to show, like Alf said, how technology can be leveraged to quickly answer typical and typical banking relationship questions. We'll visualize how data and charts and reports can be much more efficient than traditional reports. And we'll show some in-depth analysis. We'll cover some what-if scenarios, and we'll show how technology can aid in those endeavors as well. This example cockpit here shows overall informational components about banking relationships enterprise-wide, including credit, cash, loans, workflow, bank initiatives, quality, and compliance. As we've been saying, a visual representation is used to convey information very quickly and comprehensively. But when more detail is needed, you can always get at that by quickly drilling into the underlying detail. So let me go ahead and show a few examples. Okay, so up above here, first let's talk a little bit about alerts. So these are alert style metrics showing typical things that I want to watch out for, that I need control of in the system. So if I have accounts in overdraft, out of all the many accounts I have, I can have insight and quick drill down into these bank account balances that have dropped down below zero. Similarly, you'll see alerts for signatories that require approval and other bank-related tasks operationally. There's also some statistics for credit down below. I can see my credit at all the different banks. I can see my cash, and I can also use I can see what my credit is being used for. More insight into my cash. I can look at my cash across my top 5 bank account balances, and I can drill in and see in even more detail all of my bank balances by bank, and I can drill into the account level as well. So here's my bank account balances by bank and the account level just below. Moving on down, some more example KPIs, metrics, alerts, things that you'd want to be keeping tabs on, bank initiatives, bank service requests. So what requests do we have open with the bank? How do we track them? How do we relate them into our Treasury system? And how do we create a scorecard using, all the data that's in a TMS, as well as, these banking service request related metrics that you want to track. So this above item is about quality items and bank initiatives, such as new connectivity or connectivity that you want that doesn't exist today. And then down below, we're showing slices and dices of bank accounts by bank purpose, by type, and many others. Tracking bank accounts is very important, and showing inventory at a quick high level and being able to drill into that is very important. Other essential components of effective bank relationship management include understanding services each bank provides, what the costs are of those services, any compliance such as signatory management or FBAR, and bank fee analysis is particularly important. Most large companies spend quite a bit with their banks, so we'll come back to bank fee analysis in our last example. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. We just showed how technology can answer specific bank relationship questions, but now we're going to show a little bit about how some other uses of technology, for instance, mapping and other business intelligence technology can help with bank relationship management. On our first screen here, we're looking at bank account balances by country. In each country, I can see my balances. The bubble is denoting how much. It's all in base USD. I can quickly drill into any country and see all of the detail. And I also have the ability to control filters, such as if I want to look for one legal entity across the globe or domestically. So you can see that this a visual like this gives you instant visibility into cash with lots of geographical information, as well as the ability to slice and dice live. On this next tab, this is more about bank account management, bank account geographical location. So you can see your bank accounts all across the globe, or again, in a certain area, and you can drill into those. This next sheet, this is more of a banking call sheet. So this is a way to basically consolidate all of the information, whether it's your bank contacts, whether it's where you send your letters, whether it's other banking services or anything like that, or open meetings or anything that you might be tracking in the system and you want in one handy place to support, a regular call, a leadership steering call. This is a banking call sheet showing all the bank accounts historically and current, any bank contacts externally at the bank, any statistics I'm tracking about the bank, meetings, notes, signers, and really anything that you'd want to pull in to support those types of calls and discussions. I'm just going to fly through a couple more to show you again, not an in-depth coverage, but just how these types of visuals can help different client profiles. So this is a look at all of the local bank branches. So I can quickly look and see if I have bank branches in certain areas. I can see the information about that and track their distances and relationships to stores or anything like that, if that's a concern. Here's a bunch of metrics on signers. Here's my signers that have come in for signer requests to change or modify, what signers I have by bank, approved, not approved, review, workflow. I mentioned stores and retail just earlier. It's an entirely it's entirely a webinar in and of itself, but the system has a lot of support for store retail space, which is a very unique and important aspect for treasury management companies, for some treasury management companies, and much too large to cover it as part of another topic. I'm going to come back to bank fees. I'll finish up with some management metrics, which are nice to look at, tracking the revenue and having a way to put it together on a management sheet to print up or send out. In this case, looking at my bank fees versus the revenue of the company. How many entities, legal entities, are being supported by the Treasury group? How many bank fee statements or anything like that are being supported and worked on by the group? This chart has to do with the timeliness of requests. So when people have new banking requests, opening requests, this is all tracked, and it tells you how you're doing versus your SLA, if you have the right number of resources assigned. So a lot of good management metrics to bring and say, how the Treasury group is performing, what metrics are they performing on, and what are the things, perhaps the levers that can increase that performance. Okay, so my purpose of going through this is to show a lot of different visuals to show how technology and big data can be consolidated and looked at in very interesting and actionable ways to help in decision making. The last demonstration that we'll do is more of a visual what if and benchmarking analysis of historical bank fee charges, and we'll wrap up there. So we'll switch gears to bank fees. The first item I'll show is how bank fees can be tracked visually over time. Obviously, you can track all of your bank fees anytime, and seeing them stacked together is very helpful, of course. If I want to go a little bit deeper and look into things like earnings analysis research, I can see how has my earnings allowance changed over time. I can filter for certain start, end dates, certain banks, certain groups. I can see my how much in fees I have versus my earnings allowance. Do I have, is my earnings allowance covering my fees? Should I, am I putting my money in the right place? Am I getting the best return on my money, or answer questions like that? And lastly, the system, of course, can double check things like the earnings allowance, and so it can show any differences between the expected and actual earnings allowance, and it can track any disputed bank fee statements that were successfully resolved with a credit for the company. Which is a nice metric to show as far as what the Treasury group is doing in terms of real additional cost savings. And as I had started with in the beginning, we'll end with a what if analysis case. In this case, I'm looking at bank fee statements for a given period of time. And here are my banks. I have ABN, Bank of America, as you can see at the top. And what I want to do is I want to take every single activity and volume that I have done with with ABN, but I want to overlay JP Morgan's price schedule. So this is, in other words, if I had been using JP Morgan's prices for ABN's activity, for the activity with ABN, what would I have paid? And you can see down below, not too much of a difference, but if I go in and look at specific activities, perhaps I'm thinking about moving certain activities from one bank to another, I can see in this case that ABN has consistently been higher than JPM for depository services, or for any other number of groups or ways of identifying bank fee charges, which again is a large area in of itself. So hopefully we've shown a lot of nice examples about how technology can be leveraged. Thank you everyone very much for your time. And Ernie, I'll go ahead and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Nate. I know it's difficult to really get too much into that short demo. I think you showed some amazing examples, and I would encourage everyone to possibly maybe set up a call and take a deeper dive. And for me, really what attracted me to the technology, and really where I see this is kind of a game changer, is really having that visual approach to bank relationship management, but also all the aspects of it. So really even a dashboard, excuse me, in numbers and words, but you can see the graphs. There's things he didn't show you with the calendar. There's heat maps. And so it just gets you to asking the right questions. And there's also some functionality that's being developed around debt covenants and covenant management. So not only is it helping you with your bank relationships, it's helping you optimize your working capital and potentially your capital structure as well. And so you can see the information that you want to see it, but I think some of the ways, the visual capabilities, again, not only for you to ask the right questions, but for your treasurers and CFOs. So a lot of times when I was in Treasury, I would think, why did you ask this question? And so if we give the CFOs and maybe even the board better tools to visualize, right, and tell the story behind the numbers, it helps them ask the right questions. And so again, we showed there's many dimensions to bank relationship management, and then that communication piece and having the ability to have extract some intelligence. As Nathan said, we have all this data, right? How do we, intelligence means impacting decisions. How do we make better decisions in how we engage our banks, right? What services they give us and why? Where do we open and close bank accounts? Maybe can help you with your investment strategy. And so just incredibly powerful. So just want to wrap things up with some key takeaways. And so these are things that I always would think about. I used to be a Treasury leader, and I wish I would have had this slide, and I would have posted it up in my cubicle. There are two sides to a bank relationship. And so I think as practitioners, sometimes we forget that. And so I think that's something that we all need to do a better job of. And so again, further down, how can you be a good customer? And I would have asked my banks now, what can I do to help you help me, right? And so what is it that you need from me to be a better customer? And then especially in this times, and we'll have uncertainty going forward, honest communication, that might take a little time to build that trust. Proactive communication is important. So for me, I'd like to be involved in the M&A strategy. Well, I know I'm going to need different services. So let's not wait until the last minute and call our bank partners and say, hey, I need you to wire in, a company that's 25% as big as mine in AP like tomorrow. Say no. So let's be proactive, and let's align on expectations on both sides, right? So not only did things impact, right, clients, by the way, COVID has had a big impact on our bank partners, right? They've had to work remotely. They have new challenges. They have families. And so the more that we can treat relationships, not transactionally, that's going to be important. And then I think it's really important on both sides. Let's measure, monitor, and communicate, right, what bank relationship management success looks like. And I think we might do well to take another look at the scorecard approach. I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question. Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all the polling questions. Those of you interested in receiving CTP credits, you'll have to answer this last polling question and also stay on to answer the short survey that's going to launch at the end of the webinar. Again, I think for me, putting my Treasury practitioner hat on, I think the visual approach is something that's incredibly unique and different. I mean, there's a lot of technologies out there, but if you take a few minutes just to look at some of the capabilities, and especially it's all powerful, but especially in certain industries like the retail, and there's other things where this visual approach is incredibly compelling for you, can help you offer more value. Also want to let you who attend my virtual in September, thank you. We have already reset the forum to take place in September of next year, so be on the lookout for that as well. And we have several more webinars, and so we always appreciate your consideration in attending those webinars. I would like to once again thank our speakers today. Alf and Nathan, thank you so much for joining us on the webinar today. I sincerely appreciate your knowledge and insight, so thank you. And then I'd also like to thank Financial Sciences, not only for their support of my webinars, but their support for the Treasury profession as well. And so thank you so much for partnering with me to help better serve Treasury and finance professionals. And finally, to everyone, thank you so much for your valuable time. I value each and every one of you. Stay safe, stay healthy, make the rest of your day great, everyone.